Welcome to episode 2. You humans think you know evolution, but let me tell you, we invented it. First, we were wolves, all wild and free, running with the pack. Then you decided we were good workers, so we herded things and protected your stuff. And now? Now we're basically furry royalty living the good life with you. It's a pretty sweet deal, if I do say so myself. And to break it down for you, our resident experts, Tokyo and Nipsey, take it away.
We're diving into, well, one of the most ancient and profound partnerships on Earth, the one between humans and dogs.
It really is something special.
Absolutely. It's a bond that started, tens of thousands of years ago, evolving from, wolves sort of hanging around humans to the incredibly close relationships so many of us have today. Mm-hmm. But here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't like a finished story. Our relationship with dogs is still evolving right now in ways that are profoundly changing them.
That's a crucial point. Yeah, to really understand what researchers are calling the third wave of dog domestication.
The third wave.
Yeah, it's a contemporary phase, and it's driven largely by our modern lifestyles. It has pretty significant implications for dogs themselves.
Okay, third wave, we hear about the first and second waves all the time. So what makes this one distinct?
Well, think of it as the latest chapter in this really long history. The first wave, maybe starting, 14,000 to 40,000 years ago, that involved wild wolves associating with humans, probably drawn to scavenging around our camps.
Right, leftovers.
Exactly. And natural selection favored the less fearful, less aggressive ones. Their initial utility was pretty basic, maybe an early warning system. It was largely coexistence for mutual survival.
So more like wary neighbors than like family pets.
Precisely. Then came the second wave. That really picked up steam with settled agriculture maybe 10,000 years ago, and it developed through later periods like, say, the Victorian era.
The breed explosion.
That's it. This is where deliberate human breeding really took off. We started selecting intensely for specific working tasks, herding, guarding, hunting.
All the jobs.
And later for distinct physical appearances. That's what gave rise to the hundreds of breeds we recognize today. This was very much artificial selection, driven by specific jobs and, aesthetics.
Okay, so first wave, wolves adapting to us. Second wave, humans actively molding dogs for utility and looks. Where does the third wave differ then?
The difference is really in the primary selection pressure. Companionship's always been part of the picture, right?
Sure.
But in the third wave, particularly in modern developed societies, the dog's dominant role has become the emotional companion, the integral family member. So the selection pressures are shifting away from physical tasks or, perfect breed standards and towards prioritizing these intrinsic traits that help them integrate emotionally and socially into our daily lives.
So it's less about, can this dog herd sheep? Mm-hmm. Or does this dog meet the breed standard perfectly? And much more about, can this dog handle my apartment, my commute, and be my constant, emotionally connected companion?
That captures it really well, yeah. We'll explore the science behind that, how dogs are biologically changing to fit this role. Mm-hmm. The specific challenges they face living so closely with us, especially in our often busy, sometimes chaotic modern lives.
Yeah, city living.
Right. The psychology of this deepening bond, and also how service dogs kind of exemplify many of these newly prioritized traits.
Okay. So if you share your life with a dog, or you're just fascinated by this unique partnership, understanding this evolution gives you a deeper appreciation for the incredible beings dogs are becoming, and maybe helps us better support them in this relationship.
Exactly. It's not just a change in how we view dogs. It's driving real, observable changes in their behavior and actually even their biology.
Let's dive into that first then. How exactly do researchers characterize this third wave? What specific traits are being prioritized now?
Okay, so the key features really revolve around temperament, adaptability, and what we call social attunement.
Right.
We're seeing selections strongly favor calmness, gentleness, predictability, and behavior. High friendliness and sociability are really paramount. A reduction in aggression towards humans and other animals is essential.
Makes sense.
Dogs are being selected for actively seeking out and, enjoying positive social interaction with us.
So personality and disposition, they're becoming the most important criteria. more than anything else.
Absolutely. And alongside that, adaptability is just crucial. Can a dog live successfully in a small apartment, handle commuting on, say, a noisy bus, cope with busy parks, deal with constant urban noise?
Yeah.
They need the capacity to handle a really high density of stimuli without becoming, overwhelmed or reactive.
That certainly makes sense for living in our crowded world. Absolutely.
And then there's this heightened social attunement. This is their, frankly, remarkable ability to understand and respond to human social and emotional cues.
Reading us.
Totally. It's about effective communication with us and their capacity to form these strong affiliative bonds. It's less about their physical build or a specific skill and more about their deep social intelligence, really focused on navigating our world and connecting with us emotionally.
And how is the process of selection different now? It sounds, less formal than that second wave, the traditional breeding for jobs or looks.
That's a really critical distinction.
Yeah.
While deliberate breeding still exists, of course, the selection in the third wave is heavily influenced by the environment they live in.
Our environment.
Modern human society, and our lifestyles. Dogs that are naturally calmer, more adaptable, more socially attuned, they're simply better suited for our current ways of living.
Okay.
They're more likely to be chosen by prospective owners, less likely to be abandoned or surrendered because of behavioral challenges that don't fit our expectations.
Right.
And therefore, they're just more likely to live long, stable lives and potentially reproduce.
So it's almost like a form of natural selection again, but driven by human preferences and our living conditions. Kind of like the first wave, but with different pressures.
Exactly. The changing human lifestyle, increasing urbanization, smaller homes, different family structures, and yes, a greater reliance on pets for emotional connection that acts as the primary driver for these new selection pressures.
And who are some of the key researchers talking about this? I know you mentioned some names.
Yeah, Brian Hare and Vanessa Woods from Duke University are prominent figures. They've really popularized the concept of this third wave. They often point to service dogs as like prime examples of the traits being prioritized.
Okay. Calmness, intelligence,
sociability, and that deep capacity for connection with humans.
Yeah. It makes sense that dogs needing to navigate complex public spaces and support human partners would really embody these traits.
Right. And their work builds on some foundational research, like Dmitry Belaev's famous fox experiments in Siberia.
Ah, the silver foxes.
That's the one. Belaev showed pretty dramatically that simply selecting for tameness, just for reduced fear and aggression towards humans over many generations, could profoundly change a species.
Yeah.
It led to both behavioral and physical traits similar to domestic dogs.
Wow.
It was a really powerful demonstration of how selection, purely for social temperament, can reshape an animal.
So this third wave isn't some sudden leap then, but more like an intensification of traits that have been building over this long coevolution.
Precisely. It's building on millennia of shared history, but it's hyper-selecting for traits that facilitate this very deep, very integrated social life we now share with them.
Okay, so it's driven by our lifestyle, prioritizing personality and social skills. But is this just about behavior we see, or are there actual, tangible biological changes happening inside dogs?
This is where it gets truly fascinating. It's absolutely rooted in biological changes. It's not just how we interact with them, it's how they are fundamentally wired.
Okay, tell me about the biology. What's happening inside the dog that makes this possible?
Well, a key player here is the hormone oxytocin. We know it's crucial for social bonding in humans, especially parent-infant bonding. Well, it turns out it's also absolutely central to the human-dog bond.
How does that biological link work between us and them?
Well, studies show that positive interactions, things like mutual gazing, just looking into each other's eyes, petting, gentle play, these things can increase oxytocin levels in both the human and the dog.
Both.
Yeah. It creates this positive feedback loop. The release of oxytocin makes these interactions feel rewarding, which reinforces the bond and encourages more connection. There's research, for instance, suggesting a particularly strong oxytocin gaze positive loop evolved in dogs compared to wolves, though, some specifics of the early findings are still debated. But the general principle that oxytocin is vital to this cross-species bond, that's widely accepted.
So the simple acts of cuddling on the sofa or that soulful eye contact, they're not just displays of affection. They're actually tweaking our brain chemistry, and the dogs too.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And some research using intranasal oxytocin in dogs has shown it can enhance their ability to interpret human cues, like following a pointing gesture. It seems to make them even better at reading our signals.
That's incredible. What about genetics? Is there a genetic basis for these third wave traits?
Definitely. Researchers, notably at Linköping University in Sweden, have made some pretty significant discoveries here. They've identified specific gene variations. They're called SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms.
Tiny differences in the code.
Exactly, like tiny single-letter differences in the dog's genetic code, specifically in the OXTR gene. That gene codes for the oxytocin receptor, basically the part of the cell that receives the oxytocin signal.
So slight differences in the gene that tells the body how to use oxytocin are linked to how social or friendly a dog might be. Is that the idea?
That's the direction the research is pointing. Yeah. For example, some Linköping studies showed that dogs, like golden retrievers, with a particular variant of that OXTR gene, they exhibited a stronger behavioral response when they were given oxytocin.
How so?
They were more likely to seek help from their owner when faced with a puzzle they couldn't solve. It suggests this genetic variation might predispose them to be more sensitive to oxytocin's pro-social effects, maybe more likely to engage with humans for help.
That's a really specific connection. What else have they found, genetically speaking?
Okay, this is where it gets even more surprising, maybe. Their research has also identified other genes, particularly on chromosome 26, genes like SEZ6L and ARVCF. These seem linked to interspecies communication and human-directed behavior.
What do those genes do?
They're involved in things like brain development and how nerve cells connect. But here's the intriguing part. Some of these very same genes have also been implicated in human social conditions, like autism spectrum disorder and ADHD.
Wait, hold on. So dogs are being selected for enhanced abilities related to the same genetic pathways involved in human social wiring.
It's a fascinating link, isn't it? Now, it absolutely doesn't mean dogs are developing these disorders, obviously.
Right, of course.
But it strongly suggests there's this shared fundamental genetic toolkit for sociality across species. What we're likely seeing in dogs is selection amplifying certain abilities within that shared blueprint, perhaps making them exceptionally good at processing certain social signals that are important for interacting with humans, which is different from how variations in those genes might manifest in people.
Wow.
It's a really powerful demonstration of the deep genetic basis for their unique social skills.
Wow, that's a major aha moment right there. It's not just training or environment. There's this biological predisposition being intensely selected for. What about their ability to read our emotions? Is that also biological?
Absolutely. It's a core part of their biological adaptation for this companion role. Dogs have this advanced capacity to read our emotional states using all sorts of cues, body language, vocal tone, even our scent changes.
Scent changes, really?
Yeah. And a notable study by Albuquerque and colleagues demonstrated that dogs can integrate visual information from a human face with auditory information from a human voice to interpret emotion, even from unfamiliar humans.
So they combine what they see and hear.
Exactly. This ability to process cross-modal emotional cues, while it was previously thought to be unique to humans, it's fundamental to their role as these deeply attuned companions.
And the brain itself, is it adapting too?
Yes, it seems millennia of coevolution have likely sculpted the canine brain. Neuroimaging studies using fMRI, that's functional MRI, measures brain activity.
Right.
They show that areas in the dog's brain associated with processing rewards, like the caudate nucleus, they become active in response to positive human social cues. Very similar to how they function in human brains. Their brains seem wired to find human interaction intrinsically rewarding.
This all paints a picture of dogs becoming incredibly well-suited for deep companionship.
Yeah.
But you mentioned potential welfare implications earlier. If dogs are becoming this sensitive and attuned, does that make them more vulnerable somehow?
That's a really important question we absolutely have to consider, and the answer is probably yes. Increased sensitivity and attunement are wonderful for bonding and integrating into our lives, but they can also make dogs more susceptible to stress and anxiety, particularly if they live in environments that are unstable or overwhelming or isolating.
Which brings us neatly to the challenges they face, especially living in these modern, often urban environments.
Exactly. Our urban landscapes are just fundamentally different from the environments dogs evolved in over millennia.
How so?
Well, think about it. High density, limited space, constant unpredictable noise, frequent encounters with strangers, other dogs they don't know. It's just this constant barrage of stimuli.
Okay, so what kind of problems do these stressors commonly lead to in dogs? What do we see?
We see a really wide range of behavioral issues. Anxiety is a major one, especially separation anxiety.
Ah, yes, very common.
Very common. These third wave dogs are selected for strong attachment, right? But then owners often have lifestyles that require leaving them alone for significant periods. It's a mismatch. Noise phobias are common. Fear-based aggression, generalized fearfulness, hypervigilance. These are often coping responses to chronic urban stress. And sometimes you see compulsive behaviors like excessive barking or spinning emerge as coping mechanisms too.
And you said earlier the very traits we're selecting for can sometimes make these challenges worse. That sounds a bit counterintuitive.
It can be a paradox, yeah. The hyperattachment that fosters that deep bond we love, it can predispose them to more severe separation anxiety. The heightened emotional sensitivity, which helps them read us so incredibly well, can also make them more reactive to the chaos of city life, or even cause them to mirror their owner's stress levels.
Oh, interesting. They pick up on our stress.
Research from Linköping University and others has actually shown that, yes, dogs can mirror the long-term stress levels of their owners.
Wow. And focusing just on, say, puppy-like cuteness, that neoteny, that might not necessarily select for the emotional resilience needed for city life. Right?
Yeah, that's another factor. Yeah. Plus, you have irresponsible breeding practices like fad breeding, prioritizing looks over temperament and health, or puppy mills that provide terrible, inadequate socialization during critical developmental periods.
Right. Terrible places.
Awful. They contribute significantly to producing dogs that are behaviorally fragile and just ill-equipped for the demands of modern life. So the selection for companion traits, while beneficial in many ways, can inadvertently create vulnerabilities if it's not paired with responsible care and breeding.
So it's a demanding environment, and the traits we like most might actually make it harder for some dogs. What can we as humans do to help them cope and, thrive in this world we've put them in?
It really requires proactive strategies and owners taking significant responsibility. Early and ongoing socialization is absolutely fundamental.
How does it involve exactly?
Carefully exposing puppies to a wide variety of sights, sounds, people, other dogs, but in a positive, controlled way during their crucial sensitive period. That's typically up to about 16 weeks old. It's vital for them to develop the resilience to handle novelty as adults.
So critical.
It is. Inadequate socialization is probably one of the biggest risk factors for behavioral problems down the line.
And it's not just the breeder's job, right? It's a continuous process for the owner, too.
Absolutely. It's a shared responsibility right from the beginning and ongoing. Positive reinforcement training is also essential.
Why is that so important?
It builds confidence, it teaches dogs how to learn and cope with new situations, and it strengthens the bond. Adequate environmental enrichment and sufficient physical and mental exercise are also just non-negotiable. They prevent boredom and allow dogs to channel their energy in healthy ways.
Creating safe spaces within the home must help too, like a crate or a quiet corner.
Yes, providing a secure retreat is important, but ultimately the burden isn't solely on the dog to adapt to our world. It really requires us to understand their evolved needs and sensitivities and provide the right environment, the right training, and the support necessary for them to truly thrive as these integrated family members.
Speaking of integration and support, let's talk about the bond itself. You mentioned dogs are becoming integral family members. That feels like a huge shift.
It is. It's a defining characteristic of this phase of domestication. The status of dogs has profoundly shifted from often being viewed primarily as working animals or even just property to being seen and treated very much like family members, sometimes, akin to children in many households.
What's driving this shift now, do you think? Why now?
It seems tied to broader societal changes, Evolving family structures, smaller human families. People delaying parenthood means people are finding emotional fulfillment in different ways. Urbanization can sometimes lead to a sense of isolation, and dogs offer this incredibly consistent, non-judgmental affection and presence.
That's true.
And there's also just increased societal recognition and valuing of the emotional support animals provide, highlighted by things like therapy animals and emotional support animals becoming more visible.
Interesting. I read somewhere, maybe Professor Inaku Kubini, that dogs might be filling a kind of emotional void.
Yes, she has discussed that idea. That this intensified reliance on dogs for emotional connection might be linked to a perceived decline in traditional human social networks or community ties. Dogs can, in a sense, fill a potential emotional or social void for some people.
So the psychology of this bond, this deep connection, it isn't just one-sided. It's not just us loving them.
Not at all. It's very much a mutual bond. We can view it through the lens of attachment theory, actually. Dogs form secure attachments with their human caregivers, seeking proximity and comfort.
Just like kids.
In some ways, yes. And we, in turn, form deep emotional attachments to them. It's reciprocal.
And the long history of coevolution plays a role here too, presumably.
Absolutely. Millennia of living alongside us have shaped both species for this connection. Dogs are exceptionally skilled at reading our complex cues, our body language, our gaze, the nuances in our voice.
Right.
And this ability is facilitated by those biological systems we talked about, like oxytocin, which strengthens the bond every time we interact positively. Their evolved emotional sensitivity allows them to perceive our state and respond in ways that create this powerful reciprocal exchange of affection and support.
That sounds incredibly positive, almost idyllic. Are there any potential downsides or, complexities to this intense bond we should be aware of?
There are definitely important caveats. Our human interpretation isn't always perfect, right? We can project our own feelings onto dogs, or we can misinterpret their signals. That can inadvertently harm their welfare if we're not meeting their true needs because we're stuck in our interpretation. Also, as mentioned before, an over-reliance on dogs for all emotional fulfillment might sometimes mask underlying human social challenges that need to be addressed independently. It's a beautiful, complex bond, for sure, but it requires thoughtful understanding and balance.
Okay. One area where we seem to see this deep bond and these third-wave traits really clearly exemplified is in service dogs.
Oh, absolutely. They are truly pioneers in demonstrating the potential of this evolution. Service dogs really represent the culmination of selecting for many of the traits prioritized in modern canine companions.
And their roles have expanded so much beyond just guide dogs for the blind, haven't they?
Enormously. From guiding visually impaired individuals, their roles expanded to include physical assistance tasks, alerting deaf individuals. But in recent decades, we've seen this massive growth in psychiatric service dogs, PSDs,
Right.
specifically trained to assist individuals with mental health conditions like PTSD, anxiety disorders, depression.
So what specific traits are service dog organizations looking for and cultivating so meticulously? It must be rigorous.
Incredibly rigorous. Non-negotiable traits include exceptional calmness and stability, particularly in complex and unpredictable public environments. High adaptability and resilience are essential. They need to handle novelty and unexpected situations without becoming stressed or reactive.
Okay.
They require high sociability and friendliness, even towards strangers, which is interesting. And, of course, intelligence and high trainability are needed to learn all those complex tasks.
And that emotional attunement must be absolutely crucial, especially for the psychiatric service dogs you mentioned.
Absolutely critical, yes. PSDs are often selected for their capacity to sense subtle changes in their handler's emotional or physiological state, like maybe an approaching panic attack or rising anxiety, and then perform specific tasks to mitigate those symptoms, whether that's providing deep pressure therapy, interrupting a problematic behavior, or just creating a physical buffer in a crowded space.
So the traits they are specifically cultivating for these highly functional supportive roles, they sound remarkably similar to the traits you described earlier as defining the general third-wave companion dog.
They are very much aligned, yeah. Heron Woods, for instance, they see service dogs as potentially offering a kind of model for how breeding and training could be approached more widely in the general pet population, emphasizing these crucial traits like stable temperament, social intelligence, and that capacity for deep connection.
And the rise of PSD specifically, that really underlines and validates the capacity of dogs to provide significant emotional support, doesn't it?
Precisely. It highlights the profound capacity dogs have for emotional and psychological support, and that solidifies this value in our society. It influences what people look for in any companion dog now. And furthermore, the high breeding standards and focus on temperament and health in responsible service dog programs, they offer a potential path for improving welfare across the broader dog population, standing in stark contrast to irresponsible breeding practices.
Okay, so to kind of synthesize our journey here, we've explored how dogs are evolving into these ever more integrated emotional companions in this third wave, driven by our modern human lifestyles and our needs. We've delved into the fascinating biology underpinning the role of oxytocin, those specific genes linked to sociality, how their brains are wired for human connection.
Yeah, the biological roots.
We've looked honestly at the challenges this creates for dogs, particularly navigating complex urban environments, and how critical things like early socialization and responsible training are for their well-being.
Challenges are real.
We've explored the depth and reciprocity of the human-dog bond, shaped by long coevolution and attachment. And we've seen service dogs as these remarkable examples of these prioritized traits in action.
And hopefully brought it back to you, the listener. Understanding this ongoing evolution, well, it gives us a deeper appreciation for the incredible, complex beings dogs are becoming because of our shared lives. It provides a framework for how we can better understand and meet their specific needs as these deeply integrated family members.
Which brings us squarely to the ethical considerations. I mean, if we are intentionally or unintentionally selecting for greater emotional dependency and sensitivity, that places a significant responsibility on us, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. We have a clear ethical duty to ensure their well-being in this evolving partnership. And this means condemning and avoiding irresponsible breeding practices, puppy mills, fad breeding that prioritizes fleeting trends or looks over health, stable temperament, and proper early socialization.
We need to support the good breeders.
Exactly. Supporting responsible breeders who prioritize the dog's health, genetic diversity, temperament, and crucial early experiences.
And as owners, it means moving beyond just, providing food and shelter. It means recognizing and actively addressing their complex emotional, behavioral, and social needs in our world.
Yes, providing appropriate ongoing socialization, thoughtful, positive reinforcement training, enriching environments, and a stable emotional foundation for them. The third wave really demands a higher level of understanding, commitment, and empathy from us.
This evolution is clearly ongoing. What questions does it raise for future research or consideration? Where do we go from here?
Oh, there's still so much to uncover. We need more in-depth research on the long-term welfare impacts of these intensified traits, a deeper understanding of the complex genetic architecture beyond just the few identified genes we talked about, how epigenetics might play a role.
Right, how environment affects genes.
Exactly. Detailed comparative studies across different breeds and living environments, and ongoing research into the most effective training and socialization methods tailored for these modern challenges.
It's a dynamic, unfolding story.
It is.
And we're all a part of it, really.
It truly is, yeah.
So let's leave you with this thought to maybe mull over. The human-dog bond is this unique, constantly co-evolving partnership. As dogs become ever more attuned to our emotional lives, selected for their incredible capacity to connect with and comfort us in our increasingly complex world, what does the future of this unique relationship truly hold? And crucially, how do we ensure it's a positive path, not just for us, but for our canine companions who are changing right alongside us because of us?